Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I want to thank you all for joining us. Welcome to a session of online office hours sponsored to you, brought to you by the Fort Worth Chamber. My name is Dion Harrison. I am a member of the Chamber's West Area Council Board, and I'm the Chief Diversity Officer and Senior Director of Product for a financial services company here in Fort Worth called Elevate. And today we're actually glad to that you're joining this session that's been organized by the Fort Worth Chamber West Area Council Board. We have 5 board members that have joined the call today. And so I'd love for you all to please connect with them in the chat area. Be sure to introduce yourself, share your contact information if you'd like to, and also throughout the discussion, share your insights or share your questions that might come up because we want to be able to respond and be helpful for you today. But before I introduce the panelists that we have, I also want to thank Clifton Larson Allen for sponsoring the Chamber's online office hours and introduce Rick Baumeister, the company's managing partner. Rick, do you mind saying a couple of words?
Dion and team, thanks so much for the opportunity to join the Chamber again today, as we have many times for these special events. I can't think of a better topic, more timely, relevant topic to talk about than what we're going to be today. And so I look forward to hearing what everybody has to say, and I appreciate the opportunity. Thanks again.
Excellent. Thanks, Rick, again for sponsoring this event. Again, the West Area Council members that are in the chat today, our chairman, Jason Scogins, David Murray, Ken Randall, Tori White, and Juan Torres. So please feel free to get in contact with them in the chat as we get started today. And I'd also like to, before I get started and introduce the speakers, I want to take a quick poll for those of you that have opened up your chat so that you can respond to this really quickly. And I'm just curious to know how many of you are actually working remote right now? Oh, we have even fancier technology here. So thank you, Leah. Excellent. So about 80% of you are actually working remote right now. That's actually pretty impressive. And especially given the fact that the vaccine is out and it seems like things are starting to loosen up a little bit. Good to know you guys are still staying safe and taking control for yourself. So what I'd like to do is introduce you all to our panel today, and I'm gonna let them introduce themselves. So I'd like to start with Lerii Smith. Lerii, would you mind? Oh, Lerii, I think you're on mute. That is like the slogan for 2021 also, yes.
Well, and you'll see in the chat, I was on mute for a very good reason. Sorry about that, guys. Hi, everyone. I'm Lerii Smith with Project Partners, your partner for good. We are in our 27th year of advancing community causes for nonprofit, corporate, educational, and community leaders. Happy to be here.
Excellent. Thank you, Lerii. Taylor Bell. Taylor, if you would introduce yourself.
Yes, hi, my name is Taylor Bell. I'm with Indigo Yoga, and I am the Programs and Outreach Director. I'm very happy to be on this call and talking about this with y'all for sure.
Excellent. Thank you, Taylor, for coming today. Next up, we have Marcus Hicks.
Good afternoon. Marcus Hicks here with Uprise Partner, Director of Business Development. Super excited about this topic. This is a hot topic for us. We spent a lot of time talking about how do we do this with our clients and partners today. Appreciate the time. Look forward to it.
Thank you, Marcus. And last but not least, our esteemed panelist, Mr. Mike Coffey.
And I'm Mike Coffey. I'm chair of the South Area Council for the Chamber, and I own Imperative. We're a background investigations company serving clients nationwide out of Fort Worth.
Excellent. Thank you, Mike. So as you can see, we have a broad array of folks from a lot of different backgrounds today, but all have unique perspectives on this particular topic. So to give the panelists one more, a little bit of inside information from you all, I'd like to ask another poll question. has work-life balance been a challenge for you? We'll get those results. Wow, 74%. This should be a very engaging conversation today. So let's jump right in with our panelists and let's talk a little bit about it. And I think what I'd like to do is maybe start with you, Marcus, and ask a question. When your personal and work life are under the same roof, is it easy to forget to take breaks and allow some time to become, infinite? And how do you make sure that you switch off the work mode and avoid those burnouts? And do you keep a work-life balance, and how do you encourage your team to do the same?
Dion, I appreciate the question. It's a fantastic question, and I revisit that daily, if not weekly sometimes. When I started last year in this environment, the thing that I struggled, which I think the most folks struggled with, was I was working off of my kitchen table. So I was eating lunch, eating breakfast, saying hello to folks that were in passing, distracted by things that were happening outside. And so extremely difficult. What I would say has really worked out for me is just segregation in space where you can. So I've moved up to a second office, cleared out a guest room. Everything is structured like I would go and commute. And so I tell my wife frequently, hey, I'm on my way to the office. So it's a kiss and a goodbye, and then I'm on my way up the stairs. But I think you've got to find a space in your home where you can do those things like you would go to a break room, like you would go to an office, so you can turn it off and turn it on when you need to. And I think for me, that's been the biggest key to how I kind of manage and balance quality of life and what's happening between work and home.
And thank you for that, Marcus. And I know Mike shares your sentiment right now because he's kind of going through it, right? So Mike, what's your addition to that?
Well, yeah, I never thought we'd be remote, and then COVID happened, and boom, here we are. And my wife and I both work in the company. And so that was a real challenge. She does all the books and all the hard work, and I just think big ideas and kind of hope my employees will execute. But when we came home, we were fortunate that we've got 3 sons, and 2 of them are already out of the house. And the third one's a junior in high school. So he's either 18 months away from graduation or 1 criminal sentencing for being out of our house, whichever comes first. And so we were able to take over. I took over one of the bedrooms, and she took over the more preferred one for office space. And so that's worked pretty good. I think the biggest challenge for me, work-life balance has never been, I've never believed in work-life balance. I think if you work for an employer who gives employees enough freedom to take care of business, and you trust your employees to get the job done, then you can let them be free during the middle of the day if they need to go take care of their kids. And so I had 21 employees. We went remote. I've got some single parents who work for me. I've got married couples, I've got singles, and we're using Zoom as our telephony and our chat and everything all day long. And we've got an all office chat. So somebody will say, hey, I'll be back in 15 minutes. I'm going to go make a cup of coffee. Or I'm running my kid down the street for this thing. I'll be back in an hour and a half. And we just do it that way. And, as long as somebody's there to cover our clients during business hours, I've learned that the best thing we can do is work with our employees and just give them as much freedom as possible to get the job done on their schedule. And it's worked amazing. Our productivity is higher now than we measure it several different ways. It's on our dashboard every week, and it's higher than it's ever been in the history of the company. So we're never going back to the office.
That's awesome, and good to know that you guys are having high productivity, Mike. And barring a kid that might be going to jail, Lerii, do you have similar views in terms of work-life balance, or how have things been going for you?
I could piggyback on what Mike said in that, we've always said, set your office hours or your work hours, just like you would if you were in a traditional office environment. But what everyone will learn is that the virtual office environment allows everyone to perhaps work more in their best productivity zone. So if you're an employee, I'd suggest you talk to your supervisor. If you're a supervisor, I'd suggest you talk to your employee. And now's really not the time to be punching the clock. It's really the time to be setting the clear expectations and then focusing on allowing that productivity. And that also allows then the priority personal items that are part of any of our days to meld, right? To be merged in, and it can work beautifully.
Thank you for that, Lerii. That's actually really insightful. And I think, you know, if I could get Taylor to chime in on the tail end of that, because we've talked about balance, we've talked about being in your optimal productivity zone, all the things that are associated with that energy that comes from yoga. So very interested in your perspective of, you know, what you would advise in terms of this topic.
Well, I have further answers for other questions, perhaps, but for this specific question of, you know, switching or going back and forth from work mode, I 100% agree with what everybody else has said. And I have found personally, you know, I'm the programs director, and so there's a lot of, it's not just doing yoga all day. It's actually, you know, all this stuff on the back end. And for me, I found that even if I had my workspace, when I would leave it, I still had my phone on me and I was still checking different apps. And so for me, it was definitely like, when I'm ready to work, whatever that productivity's time zone is, that's when I start looking at those things. And until then, enjoy my cup of coffee or tea. And when I'm done, I need to be done, unless there's some other circumstance, but so that then I can be present to my family or, you know, my off time. So
Yeah, absolutely.
just being aware of that handheld thing too, you know.
Yeah, and I can see how managing that or segregating that would be a little bit difficult. But can you talk a little bit about how you prioritize and how do you set those boundaries with managing your time?
Well, one thing I have that I love, I'm sure most of you have something like this, but is asana, which helps, yeah, you know, it helps keep your tasks. And that helped me a lot to get it tangible and to assign a schedule to it. So I didn't feel so overwhelmed and see, wow, I've got 50 tasks that seem like they need to be done right now, when that's not true. What's true is, you know, these 5 need to be done today and these, you know, 7 tomorrow. And that gave such mental relief when I had it down in that way, so that I could see in what everybody's been talking about, like, oh, when I've achieved those things, then it's okay, I can be done for the day because I've been super productive in this amount of time. And so it's not, I worked smarter, not harder, right? And that's the game.
That's awesome.
Let me add in, she mentioned asana. As a fellow yogi, I call it asana for 2 years, right? Before somebody clarified that, no, it's asana. You got the emphasis on the wrong syllable. I'm like, well, maybe not. I don't know.
I know. I get, yes.
Well, I'm actually glad you chimed in, Mike, because I'm curious to know, since you have employees that are working remote, is it difficult to keep the culture? I know you talked a lot about how it seems like your productivity has increased, but how have you managed to kind of keep the culture of your company going with them being remote?
I'm convinced that culture is about the people you hire at the very beginning. I don't think you can really create a culture unless you're hiring around it, and we've hired around it always. And so, but what we have seen, I follow, we've got a whole bunch of different chat groups in Zoom. So my different teams are talking to each other a lot, and I drop in there and just pay attention to what's going on in there, just to kind of see, and I see how they help each other, how they volunteer, how they reach out for help, how they volunteer information. And so I know that part's going well. The IT guys promised me that we're about 10 days away from rolling out a new, we've been on remote desktop for years anyway. We're rolling out a new upgrade to a VDI system that they say will support Zoom video from the remote desktop clients. And I think that's going to be a big help too, to be able to actually see eye to eye with people, because that's the one thing we haven't really had for most of my employees on their work systems. So we work a lot around that, but really we still do management. We touch base, we have same page meetings, and anytime we've got a group of employees together for a phone call or anything, we always talk about the values, and we really live our values and manage to them. So I don't think we've had, the hardest thing we've done is onboarding new employees into our culture. So far, that's gone really well, and I think we get better at it every time. It just means I think we need to spend a lot more time up front, for lack of a better word, indoctrinating people into what our culture is and what our values are and what they look like and what they don't look like.
Right.
We already do a lot of that in the interview process anyway, but you don't get that real experience in person when you're all remote. So I think we're going to continue to build on that part.
There's 2 points that you made in there that I want to pivot over to Lerii and to Marcus both. But Lerii, first with you. Mike mentioned onboarding new employees. Has that been a challenge for you also? Did you kind of, you smiled a little bit when he said that, and so I picked up on maybe you understood kind of what he meant by that.
Well, actually, that's not what I was wanting to piggyback on. So
Okay.
I'll circle. So I'll excuse me. But I will circle back to that.
Okay.
Excuse me. It'll circle back. I promise it'll circle back. But what Mike said that made me think of the notes I had made to myself was, if you haven't already, it's time to either restate or revisit what those core values of your company are. And most importantly, then make sure that your remote working policies and practices reflect it. Like, for instance, if independence and autonomy and accountability are part of your core values, then the clock punching side of a policy would be counter to that, right? And so I guess I just wanted to mention, I thought earlier this year I might write an article titled something like, "What did you do at work in 2020? We kept our nose to the grindstone." And the reason that was like a possible title of an article was that literally when I revisited our core values, the reason I think we just sort of kept on keeping on is that our policies and procedures aligned with the culture and the core values. Thus, we just didn't have a break. I mean, we didn't really have an issue, if you will. But then to connect it to onboarding, it would be the same thing, right? You're going to onboard remotely for the most part, just like you work remotely. So those same that same approach would be in effect.
Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
And Marcus, I think what I wanted to pivot off from you is the technology mention that Mike had, and whether or not technology has posed a challenge for you all, or how have you leveraged technology in order to try to reconnect with your employees?
It's really interesting. Mike said the magic words I hear from clients all the time. There's a legacy system we very quickly had to spin up and get remote with what's going on. And there's a lot of different ways to do it, but there's home Wi-Fi, there's security that you're having to deal with. There's the cost of licensing. Do you use Zoom? Do you use Slack? Do you use Teams? All are great tools, but I'd say it's two-part. Before you decide what technology, you first have to decide what we're talking about, and that's what are our business practices and what does our culture look like? So we know how to stay plugged in with our teams. And so, like for us, for example, we've got all three. We've got a Slack channel that we use to have conversations with clients. We internally do a lot in Teams with how we think about sharing documentations, team meetings, or even, we do a lot of lunch and learn or tech talk. And then things like this, when we're doing client meetings or biz dev meetings, then we transition over to Zoom. And so each platform or each technology kind of offers benefits. You got to figure out what's right for you. But I would say, like you're assessing what you're doing from a culture perspective, you also need to be assessing what is my infrastructure and what does my IT environment look like, and where do I have gaps? Because it's not as easy just to stand up a virtual environment for me to have meetings, because you're also opening up risk for other things for your business, network firewall, VPN connections, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's absolutely a topic that should be top of mind. And we're seeing a lot of clients and a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners say, hey, I need to assess where I am so I can stay connected to my team and to my clients.
Sure. Yeah, thank you for that, Marcus. So I do want to reset with the rest of the folks that are in the chat today and ask another quick poll question. And that question is, which do you prefer, working remote, working at the office, or a combination of both? Combination of both, but not by a large margin if you look at the other two. So that's an interesting response. So 28% of you like working remote, 21% of you like working at home, and 56% of you like a combination of both. So I guess where I'd like to take that question, and maybe I'll start with you, Lerii. While we may not have coworkers that are dropping by our desk, you're still likely to have to deal with some interruptions and distractions. And so how do you deal with that in a home environment, and how do you make it safe for your employees to feel like it's okay to have to take a break maybe and deal with those things?
I think that's a great question, but I think it relates to everything that we've talked about so far. If there are expectations and folks are focused on the productivity to meet those expectations, then it sure makes the flexibility of working remotely more possible. But just like in a traditional office, create a system that signifies your state of work, right? In a traditional office, you might put a sign on your cubicle or on your desk. You might do a Slack message out. My kids were raised that if the door was closed, and that meant do not disturb type of thing. But if it was open, that meant that we could converse. Also, it's imperative these days with with several adults, right, spouses or partners working from home, to sort of coordinate schedules for the Zoom calls.
Right.
And many things like that. Some tag teaming, I think, is important.
Yeah. And Taylor, as kind of program manager, I'm sure you end up picking up your phone midstream in some places every once in a while. How have you been able to manage that? Because I imagine that you get calls from clients, and also maybe some of your instructors to kind of deal with on the fly issues.
For sure. Yeah, we have a team of 40. So it's, yeah. And so it's a constant thing. So boundaries are important. But for me, these distractions are either, I do my best to discern, is it something I can quickly answer, be efficient, and get right back into my workflow? Or, if it's my dog looking at me with the big eyes and she wants a walk, like, it's an opportunity. Like, okay, take a 10-minute walk. That's a good distraction, So it's just that discerning of, like, do I need to just handle this and get back to it, or like what Mike's dealing with right now, or is it an opportunity to, like, step back and take a better break?
Yeah, that's a great point. And Mike, since you pointed that out, is it easy for you to kind of take that? To take the autonomy to take those breaks for yourself?
Yeah, I'm your typical entrepreneur though, so I'm real ADHD. And so I could never just sit and work for more than an hour and a half or 2 hours at my desk anyway. Or I'd be, and that's probably why my employees are more productive, because I'm not out walking around chit-chatting, sitting on the corner of their desk, spitballing ideas and doing all the things that I would probably do to interrupt them. So that's probably part of it. So for me, my wife is here at the house a lot during the day because we work together, but also I will, I do yoga every morning at 6, but, sometimes I'll just plan ahead. That's one thing I've gotten really good at that I wasn't good about in the office space, is planning things I want to do on my calendar and putting them in ink, basically on the calendar. I'm going to do this. And so planning, in advance. So if there's a special yoga class I want to go to, or I want to, I used to register webinars and skip them. You never go to them, because I get busy or whatever. And I've been a lot more disciplined about doing saying, this is really a valuable thing, a way for me to personally and professionally spend my time. I'm going to do this. Sure. And then respecting that.
It's interesting because there seems to be, just based on this discussion, that there's a little bit of artistry here with balancing between what's productive and what's, and what you're recognizing as being maybe good habits or bad habits. Very often, when I'm working from home, I find myself going to the refrigerator more often to drink water. And I don't know why all of a sudden, because I didn't go drink water that much when I was at the office, but it's a good habit, right? But I know that I do that more often. And so Marcus, I don't know if you've had similar, experiences where you're trying to figure out like what's good and what's bad in this, and how do you avoid, creating challenges for yourself with the conveniences of being at home.
Yeah, I love that. Mike's right. I get bored pretty easily, especially in an environment where I've had multiple people that I can have meetings with and chit chat, and sometimes some of the best ideas come out of that. I think take advantage of that though, right? So maybe it's not the refrigerator, maybe it's going outside. Maybe it's just taking a 15-minute break to read a chapter in a book. Maybe it's making a phone call that you haven't made. What I find is historically, kind of pre-COVID, I would plan everything up to 8 to 5, 9 to 5, whatever your day is, but then I wouldn't plan how to reconnect with folks in my personal life. And so now I use that 15 minutes, whatever it may be, to say, hey, I just had a conversation with somebody that was giving me an update on something. I haven't talked to them in a couple of weeks. I'm going to use this 15 minutes, break away from screen time. So imagine now we're telling ourselves, like we tell our kids, too much screen time, and I'm re-engaging in conversations with folks, which is reconnecting me in a more just intimate way with people in my life, and allow me to do things like this. I am absolutely somebody who will sign up for a webinar and never make it because I let another meeting get in my way. And now that I plan kind of my personal life and things that I find important, I'm able to get more engaged in community, more engaged with my kids, more engaged with friends I haven't talked to. And you can be remote, so they don't have to live in your city anymore. You can do things in other places where maybe you haven't been able to before. And so I just try not to trade bad diet habits, because that's the easiest thing to do, is to snack, for more productive things that challenge my mind and keep me connected with people. And that's not always easy. It's easier said than done. That's a struggle, but that's typically what I try to do.
I saw a lot of head nods when you said the bad diet habits. So I think that resonated with the room for sure, and very much appreciated for you kind of vocalizing that. I do want to go back to you, Taylor, just for a second, to pivot off of that from a diet and exercise perspective. Like, are there things that you recommend that people do in terms of trying to keep themselves, kind of productive, active while they're in this type of an environment? And because it is a very different scenario of, fostering people to come into a yoga studio, right? Versus staying at home. Do you find that that you have more clients that are doing things at home with you now? And how's that working out?
It's working really well. And yes, for sure. yes, people's habits, it's kind of been a precarious situation. And I think it's so personal of figuring out, like, there's some universal things: stay hydrated, move, like every hour, get up, move, stretch in some way, deeper breathing. That, if I could tell you nothing else, it would be to breathe deeper, get more oxygen to your brain, think more clearly, be more awake, feel less anxiety. That's huge. Check in on your breath. Aside from that, I think it's figuring out what's going to support you best. And so for some people, it might seem indulgent to have Uber Eats bring them a delicious salad, but if that's going to get you to eat a delicious salad, it's worth it. And, you know, or maybe it's like, you know, is it yoga in the morning? Is it a workout at the gym after? Is it getting a regular massage? Because that is, again, is not indulgent. That is like what Nettie was saying before the call, her shoulders are up in her ears. Well, you know, take care of yourself in the ways that you see are needed, and don't see that as indulgent. See it as, you know, self-management, self-sustainability. And I just saw somebody say something about donuts. Like, yeah, and sometimes you eat a donut because that's what's going to get you through it. And that is all good. Like, again, just being, it's back to discerning what's going to help you best.
That's great. Thank you for that. And Lerii, I'd love to maybe pivot a little bit, you know, but kind of staying in that same vein. And we talked about, you know, kind of coffee breaks and being able to kind of impromptu walk up to some of your employees and connecting to them that way. How do you keep team communication from feeling like it's fragmented, especially leveraging all of the different pieces of technology? As Mark has talked about, using Slack, using Teams, and all these different pieces of technology, how do you prevent that communication from feeling fragmented to your group and keep kind of a cohesive vision for what you're trying to get accomplished?
I think that's a great question, and I'm going to go about it in maybe a funny way, but to me, the lack of fragmentation would come when everyone's working collaboratively and independently, both at the same time. And that comes with trust, right? And trust equals consistency over time. So what we, you know, sort of our mode of operation is, you know, among team members, both vertically and horizontally, and with clients and collaborators, under promise and over deliver. Be very literal. You know, Taylor, I'm going to get you that graphic by noon tomorrow. And then Taylor will expect that by noon tomorrow, or the reason that she's not going to get it. And more than that, she'll probably have it by about 10 instead of noon. And once that trust of where an assignment or a team member has asked you to do something, you've accepted the responsibility, you take care of it, you communicate back that it's done, then it's off your coworkers list too, and they can move on to other things. There's like 16 tips in the blog that we wrote about this time last year, and I think Nettie put that link in the chat. I mean, there's really a lot to just the manner in which we all work together, right, that makes that happen.
That's excellent. Mike, would you share that same sentiment? I saw a lot of head nods there.
Yeah, accountability, having a culture of accountability, you know, it's like, you know, Lencioni's stuff around accountability. If you've got that culture where you say you're going to do it and everybody just assumes, yeah, you're going to do it, and you don't even have to ride herd on your people at that point. I heard a lot of, when this first started, a lot of our clients, a lot of managers were saying, oh, we can't go remote. I like to manage by walking around. And I always say manage by walking around means you really don't like to manage. What you're doing is just trying to play gotcha. And I'm convinced that, you know, if people are clear about what the objectives are, they understand what the company's mission is and what their role in contributing to it are. If you've hired the right people, you can let them go, and they'll do it. They'll do it better than you expected them to, and just make sure that they've got the tools. And so, you know, it's, you know, 5 Dysfunctions, it's one of the books that anytime somebody joins our our team that I ensure that they read in the first year. It's part of our reading list, because I just think understanding this is who we aspire to be as an organization, and I think we're there most of the time, is really helpful to somebody coming on board.
That's awesome. Really great practices there. Marcus, I have maybe an inverse way of asking, kind of a similar question here, but quite often some people get concerned about feeling like they're unnoticed or have not been addressed, because of this disconnection or absence of presence. And have you detected that there's conflict where people are working remote, and if so, what are some ways that maybe you've addressed that?
It's a hot topic for us right now as we continue to add to the team, is how do we keep plugged in? And there's a couple different things we do. Sometimes I think it's easy to get too meeting heavy, to just check in with folks, whether it's about the work that you're doing or just to see how things are going. And we've made some adjustments. We'll just do a stand up on a Monday to say, what are the truly big priorities that are customer facing things? But I think the fun thing that we do is every Friday, we block out kind of the last hour and a half, and we do a bit of a virtual happy hour, and it's lessons learned and celebrations. And so what it allows is, top to bottom or bottom to top, depending on where you want to be, all of us are sharing what went wrong. And sometimes it's ugly. Sometimes some of the things that us as a leadership group are sharing with other people, mistakes we made in conversations, things that happened with client, overcommitted. I mean, we heard that earlier, whatever it may be. And then the flip side of that, it forces folks to really think through and celebrate the small things every week that begin to happen. And as a leadership group, one of the things that we try to do is we say, hey, who are our bottom two? And bottom two is not performance. Bottom two is who have we not engaged with that we want to have conversations with, and how do we as a leadership group put our arms around those folks? And that's just something as an impromptu virtual coffee. Hey, let me just touch base with you. Teach me something about what you're doing. How do we get plugged in? And all of us kind of have marching orders based on who our bottom two are. So we're touching the organization. And so it's not by department, by division. It is literally all hands on deck, regardless of what your function is for the organization. Let's go out and let's make sure that we're connected with people.
That's
and
great.
so it takes a commitment to make sure that you're doing that. But again, I think you almost have to have more touches in a virtual environment than you would otherwise in the office because of the obvious.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like time well spent for sure. Right? You said mistakes, accomplishments, and
lessons learned. So we'll do lessons learned and celebrations.
Lessons learned and celebrations. Okay. Those are really good. I actually took a note of that myself, particularly around the bottom two. I have a fairly small team, but it's within a big organization. We've got about 500 people that work with us, and so we definitely have probably like a bottom 20 across our organization that we probably need to reconnect with. So thank you for sharing that. What are some other things that that you all have done? I mean, Taylor, you talked about having 40 folks that you have on your team. How do you reconnect with them and kind of keep them feeling like they're engaged and that you're in tune to kind of what they're going through on a daily basis?
Well, my first thing was to stay visible to them throughout all of last year in whatever capacity I could. Also, what was said earlier about trust is consistency over time, that I have really committed to, as much as possible, over delivering, staying consistent with them so they trust me, so that there's a feeling that they can come to me. I'm not unattainable. If there's a breakdown, let me know. And it works, which is really great. And also I do, speaking of things that are a little tedious, but worth it, I do monthly check-ins with all the staff where I send them specific stats and things like that so that they know I see them. And it's none of these stats are based on judgment. They're just they're facts. I like facts. It takes emotion out. to an extent. And then again, if that trust is there, they know that this is a conversation. If there's something that's not quite working, there's a conversation that we can have so that I can support them.
I love that. Thank you.
Mhm.
Lerii, are there other practices that you've used as well to kind of reconnect with your employees?
You know, the one thing I would mention that, I don't know, maybe we're a little odd, but we use voice notes on occasion. You know, that's just an app on your phone. And a lot of times, email and Zooming and even texting gets sort of old, right? And we want to be on the move because I don't know about y'all, but I can solve many more business concerns if I'm on the move than when I'm really sitting in front of a screen, right? So we use voice notes. And so a lot of times if you have a team, whether it's 3 or 20, you can leave a voice note that says, hey, everybody, wanted to give you all a quick update. I just met with Bruce Rabin, and it was so good to see him again. And hi, Bruce. And learned that he's doing this, this, and this, and I wanted everyone to know. And it's just a little. Sometimes it's a little more personal, and then the responses back can be a little more personal too. So we're not together, right? But we're not on a screen, which we all appreciate, but yet we're communicating in that way.
That's great, Lerii. I can really appreciate the personal touch there. And I think it definitely does kind of make a difference whenever you're remote and people don't see you and they just see you in presentation mode. I know in Teams, there's a praise module that's embedded in Teams, and it has kind of some inherent, things like, teamwork, collaboration, things like that. And it's like a little badge that you can basically kind of push out to, a group and write a little note about something that someone has done. So if you haven't seen that, it's actually a really cool part of Teams.
Mike, so let me follow up on one thing that Taylor and Lerii both mentioned. We're big on accountability. All my employees every day, when they come in and first log in the system, they get their personal scorecard from the previous day. It's got their productivity numbers, their quality numbers, and they know exactly that, everybody knows what the percentages, what the targets are. And so they know exactly how they did the previous day, and anything that was a ding on their, on their performance or their quality, they've got the references right there and they can go back and figure it out. But because my folks are sitting in front of 2 or 3 computer monitors all day long, and I'm and with very little social interaction, I'm hiring introverts. So they loved when we went remote because they don't have to actually talk to anybody now. And they were already talking to each other, even across the office, using back then Skype and chatting back and forth. So it wasn't a big transition. But now with Zoom's upgrades and using it for our telephone and our chat system, I'm seeing them send emoticons across, memes and gifts to each other, and just all kinds of things like that it's a good way for them to communicate. And so I think you have to, when you're trying to figure out how you're going to recognize people, like if you've got a big team of introverts, calling somebody out in a group saying, hey, Joe, great job on that. I really appreciate it. Joe's going to be like, I don't want that. I don't want that kind of public acknowledgement. I don't want, so you got to know how to, for your team and for each of the members of the team, how they want to get that recognition. And I've seen my folks just really thrive this way. Now, if you had a whole room of, salespeople or extroverts, things like that, then you're going to have to find a different way. They're going to need to be fed differently. And I think it's important to remember that.
That's a great point. And that also kind of assumes that you kind of know a little bit more about your employees on a much more personal level to for sure. So all of these touch points and check-ins with your employees seems like it invaluable to kind of keeping that ecosystem of engagement there. So, but you brought up an interesting point that I really would like to talk about before we get off, and that's the topic of recruiting. And how has, some of your recruiting maybe changed since, kind of post-COVID? And have you had any particular challenges or has it, been kind of status quo? Did you have to change anything at all? And Mike, if you don't mind, I'd love to start with you.
The only thing that changed for us is where we do our final interviews, our in-person interviews. We're not bringing them into the office because that's just a big empty space and it's kind of depressing. But other than that, I mean, we've got a really rigorous. I'm an HR guy by background, like, you know, and so I've got a really, you know, I'm big on, you know, hard to hire, easy to fire if it comes down to it, you know, after mentoring and trying to save people. But and so we've got a really, so by the time we're at the point where we've done telephone interviews and all that, and you mentioned knowing your employees, we use behavioral assessments throughout the process. And so, you know, I'm really tuned in to how somebody likes to work, what motivates them, and those kinds of things along the way. So the only thing that's really changed in our employment process is I'm going to the employees wherever they're at, or the candidates wherever they're at, and sitting down with them at a restaurant or Starbucks or something like that, and doing the in-person interviews. But that's really the only thing that's changed for us. Interesting. Well, I will say that, but not having a location that they have to report to has given me a bigger candidate pool. We've decided our policy is you can live anywhere in Texas and come to work for us. I don't want to become a multi-state employer and have taxes and filings in other states, but as long as with 48 hours notice, you can be in Fort Worth for a meeting, because if we ever get past COVID, I intend to have at least once a month a full staff in-person meeting at a restaurant or something. But as long as they can agree to within that 48-hour notice, they can do that. They can live anywhere. And I just hired somebody in North Dallas, and in the Plano area, and they would never have made that commute into Fort Worth. So I got a better candidate. And I think everybody ought to live in Fort Worth. But some people don't have that blessing. So but I got a better, great candidate that I wouldn't have had if we had been tied to a physical location. Yeah, that's a really great point, and it definitely opens up the talent pool when you can kind of spread your wings a little bit. Marcus, have you all changed much at all about your hiring practices since COVID has kind of had everybody working remote?
We haven't. I'm a product of that environment. So our corporate office is in Maine. Our head of marketing is in Houston. I'm here in Fort Worth. I've got an engineering team in New York. I've got other folks in Virginia. And so for us, I think COVID has probably been a positive impact, because I think people are thinking about remote work differently, and where historically maybe they didn't look at, when they were looking for jobs, postings outside of their market. There's more of that now. Now you've got to be creative. I love what Mike said. They've opened up Texas, but on most of these job boards, that also means you've got to post in a couple different locations for people in that market to see it. But you definitely open up your talent pool, and you can be a bit more selective with who it is that you're hiring. We're also seeing that from a kind of take it all the way back from a culture perspective. If you've created an environment that your folks like, and they can be remote, like anything else, your number one advocate are your internal folks. They're telling their friends, or they're sharing with their network that, hey, I work at this great organization, you should come and work there. That's how I ended up with Uprise. Somebody that I knew that worked down the Houston market shared it was a great place. I ended up here. We're growing our team that way organically, where we're finding good folks who naturally are coming in and understand accountability, because you've got accountability to somebody and then we're adding to the team that way. But it does open it up, especially as folks have kind of, you grow in your career and you move away. It doesn't mean that you don't stay connected. Absolutely. That's excellent. And Taylor, how about you? I mean, I feel like every yoga instructor is a happy person, and I could be wrong by that, but I've just always had a happy yogi that I've interacted with. But has anything changed for you in terms of recruiting?
No, we fortunately haven't really had that problem historically, and especially in the past year, because we took classes down. We had a very expansive schedule, and we took it down a little bit, and we're slowly starting to expand it again. So our teachers were just grateful to still be able to be a part of the team, and we've been good. So
excellent. That's great. Lerii, what about you? Have you all changed much about your process?
No, Dion, we really haven't. We're a very small team, always have been, and most of our folks come from referrals.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, the last time we advertised was 20 years ago.
Oh, wow.
I know, isn't that
Really?
funny? Okay, and the funny thing about that is that was in a Wedgwood Shopper ad. So that tells you things have changed.
Wow, that's a flash
That's
from the
awesome.
past. Yeah.
And that associate still works for Project Partners. I know, isn't that just that's my funny story of the day.
So maybe Nettie, we should capture that as a best practice to advertise in Wedgwood. And then you never have to recruit again.
Oh.
That's awesome. That's great. Well, I really appreciate all these comments, and I think I have one more poll question that I'd like to throw out to the rest of the group, and that question is, what impact has COVID had on your workout routine? So that question is, or the answers, responses are, I work out more now, or I work out less now. This should be an interesting one. Hopefully this will motivate me. 58% of you said that you work out less now, and 42% of you said that you work out more now. That's very interesting. I will say I fit in the camp of working out more now, but I also feel like I do a little bit less than what I was doing before. But maybe that's okay. Taylor, maybe you could tell me whether that consistency is probably better than just overdoing it in one session.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Consistency 100% is where it's at. And I think picking what works best for somebody personally, whatever that workout looks like, and see it as something that's really going to maintain you not only physically, but mentally, emotionally, professionally, and making that a priority. And even if 15 minutes is better than none. So just do something.
Awesome. Then I don't feel bad anymore. Lerii or Marcus or Mike, how do you guys feeling about the workout piece? Are you guys working out more now?
Yeah, I'm down 6 pounds from pre-COVID. It was the 6 I could never get rid of, and I got rid of those. I was already had a daily yoga practice, but I've had a friend who was also an extrovert who was feeling very landlocked, and so we started running together and doing some other stuff. And so, yeah, it's been great for me. And you mentioned water earlier. And the best thing I did through COVID is the best purchase was a Soda Stream. Just a little machine that carbonates water, and it's 0.8 liters in a bottle. And I'm probably drinking 6 or 7 of those a day, and that's twice the water I used to drink. So it works for me. Oh, and the stand-up desk, I just stood up, for instance, because and we make it to all our employees. We'll give them one of the desktop appliances to do stand-up desks, and if they'll use it. And so a lot of them are. So that's been helpful, I think, too, just to not be slumped over the keyboard all day.
That's awesome.
Well, and I can just comment because I live and work directly across from one of the Trinity trails in my neighborhood. So I have neighbors who are on this call who will see me on the trail all the time. Again, movement is good, and I get as much work and brain break out there on the trail as I do at my desk. So
I would like to say that I work out as much, but I'm definitely in the camp where it's a bit more inconsistent, but I'm getting some other things in. So, running and biking is becoming my new favorite, where before it was going to the gym. So it's a different workout, but it's tougher because I haven't quite gotten a rhythm for that yet. And I don't like cold weather. And so I'll be back soon when the weather turns. I need to do some basic things. Taylor, maybe we need to chat at the house.
That's great. I did not want to put everybody on the spot, but I appreciate the fact that everybody was willing to share. So thank you very, very much for that.
And Marcus, I'll add that Indigo yoga is indoors, right? So, you don't have to be in the cold.
I like it. I like the shout out.
clearly Mike is a hardcore yogi for sure and is advocating for that. And I don't blame you. It's a great workout. Hey, so listen, everyone, I really want to thank everyone for attending today. I also want to make sure that we also thank Rick Baumeister and CLA for sponsoring this event. A huge thank you to all of our panelists today, Taylor, Lerii, Marcus, Mike. Thank you for your candor, thank you for your openness, and thank you for your willingness to share everything today. And thank you to everyone who attended today. I mean, this has been really helpful, I think, for me at least, and hopefully helpful for you. And hopefully you all have engaged a little bit in the chat to get to know each other a little bit more. I'm going to share my LinkedIn information if anyone would like to connect even after this. But also, just so you know, that the area council boards are also working on starting new networking groups for members. So be on the lookout for some information in April. If you have a particular interest, we're open for some ideas around that, but really appreciate the fact that you all joined today and for another episode of Online Office Hours. And we'll continue to do things like this that hopefully are impactful to you. And unless there's anything else, I'd love to just say thanks again and maybe open the floor for some last minute comments from the panel.
I just want to say thank y'all for asking me. I love these kinds of conversations, and it's a very supportive feeling, and I just appreciate it a lot. Thank y'all for asking me to be here.
Thank you, Taylor.
I'm gonna stay, y'all.
That's a very Texas yogi spot for
Yeah,
sure.
you would, Mike, you would.
I like it.
Yes, I appreciate being here, but I really do look forward to seeing everybody in person as well, I have to admit.
Sentiments the same here. Thank you, Lerii.
Appreciate the invite. This was super exciting and a great way to kind of be introduced to the community and to the chamber. So I love it. Hope we do more of these, in person or otherwise. It's been great. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Marcus. And thanks, Leah, for managing everything and not allowing me to trip over myself. I appreciate that. And Nettie, thank you very much also for facilitating this. This has been great. And again, to those of you that have joined us today, if you have other ideas that you like to have some different topics that we can help your business with, that's what the Fort Worth Chamber is for, and we look forward to helping you. And thank you again to our board members that in the West area who sponsored this today. So have a great day, everyone.